And I guess we'll move on to the next portion of our program today, which is we're going to have our next panel on what does the future hold, which is exciting. And the moderator of this panel, I am looking, making sure you were here, is Margaret Eads. Margaret has spent more than 30 years as a political writer, best known for her work as a political reporter and editorial writer for the Virginia Pilot. Margaret graduated from Tennessee Wesleyan College and covered the state of Virginia politics for the Virginia Pilot before switching to editorial writing. She's the author of several books, including Finding Sarah, A Daughter's Journey, and she is currently working on a book on the civil rights pioneers Oliver Hill and Spotswood Robinson. So she is going to be moderating your panel today. Please welcome Miss Margaret Eads.
Good afternoon. Let me get all of my things out here, something to keep time with. Wasn't that a great speech by Thelma Drake? I'd give her another hand. Women today are underrepresented at all levels of government. 2010, you might recall, was supposed to be the year of the woman, or at least the year of the conservative woman. Instead, the total number of women in Congress declined for the first time in 3 decades. Nationwide, the proportion of women serving in statewide office is also in retreat. It's now at 22%, down from 28% a decade ago. And the number of women serving in state legislatures also dropped in 2010. What is to be done about this? Today we have with us 4, I think, maybe 5, but I believe 4, knowledgeable, dynamic people who are going to help us come up with an answer to that question. I'd like to introduce them to you. First is Dr. Jocelyn Elders. Dr. Elders is a pediatric endocrinologist and public health administrator. She was appointed the nation's 16th Surgeon General in 1993 by President Bill Clinton and served until December 1994. Today, she's a popular national lecturer on public health issues, and if you follow the news, you know that she is no shrinking violet. I'm not sure how the names go here, but Kate Obenshain is next. Kate, where are you? Kate also is not a shrinking violet. Kate is a leading conservative voice as vice president of the Young America's Foundation, also a Fox News commentator. She has served on Virginia's Council of Higher Education and is the first female chair of the Virginia GOP from 2003 to 2006. Welcome, Kate. Next, we have Bob Gibson. Bob is one of Virginia's best-known journalists, having worked both as a political reporter and columnist for the Charlottesville Daily Progress and as an NPR host and contributor. These days, he's executive director of the Sorensen Institute for Political Leadership at the University of Virginia. And he is distinguished by being the only male on any panel today. Welcome, Bob. Next, we have former delegate Terry Suit. Terry was a very popular member of the Virginia General Assembly, representing portions of Virginia Beach and Chesapeake from 2000 to 2008 when she resigned. And today she serves in the cabinet of Governor Bob McDonnell as Secretary of Veteran Affairs and Homeland Security. Welcome, Terry. We were to have with us a fifth panelist, Delegate Jennifer McClellan, who I think is caught in a session. She's carrying out the job she was elected to, but just in case she's able to join us, I'll tell you a little about her. She has represented Richmond's 71st District in the Virginia General Assembly since 2006. She's considered a rising Democratic star. In private life, she's a Verizon attorney working in state regulatory matters in Virginia, North Carolina, West Virginia, and D.C. So with this panel, we should have no trouble coming up with a game plan for expanding the role of women in state and national politics. Let's get to it. The first thing I'd like to do is just quickly move down the panel, and if we could just do this very fast, we'll come back to discussing these things at length. I'd like to just ask each of you, what, in your view, is the greatest obstacle, structural, cultural, political, historic, to increasing the number of women in American political life? Dr. Elders.
Well, thank you, Margaret. When I think about the greatest barriers to we have increasing women's role in political life, the thing I think about and think is the greatest important problem that we have is really cultural, more cultural than anything else. It's we don't vote for women. When you get to the parties, they say that we want to have somebody that we know can win. You know, the aim of the game is to win. And they just don't think that women can win. Well, you know, I think if you're a woman who's been out there doing things, you know, getting on school boards, getting to, you know, to state legislature, doing things that I think we heard our previous speaker talk about that we need to do to get well known in the community and on an issue. You know, you don't have to be well known for everything in the world, but be well known and out there for something. I think that those are, to me, that's the thing that we as women do not do. We've spent all of our life helping men win. And it's time, and we as women don't go out to help other women win. So we're part of the problem. And I think that as we develop more confidence and get more involved, we can get more women involved earlier, more young women involved. And I think mentorship, what we heard over and over Honorable Drake talk about, is her willingness to sit, didn't make any difference what party it was, to sit down and talk about the issues and the problems. So I think if I had to put one word, pull out one word, I would just the word I pull out is cultural. And that we just, we want our party leaders, we aren't ready for women to be the leaders. And we've had some, you know, and we're proud of them.
Okay, thank you. Culture. Okay, Bob, what would you say?
I would agree with the general that attitudes and traditions are a serious thing to overcome, and they're overcome generationally. We forget sometimes how recent the attitudes and traditions were that barred the door rather than left it partly open. When I arrived at the University of Virginia in 1968 from Arlington with my male classmates, U.Va. was all male. If you wanted to attend U.Va., you were either in the ed school if you were a woman, or you were in the nursing school if you were a woman. You know, these things die hard. You don't see that in any of the current generation that attends the university. The university today is mostly women. The law school at the university is mostly women. And here's Jen.
Thank you. Okay, Kate.
Well, Margaret, you're the boss today, so I will try to stick with the premise. But I will say, on the day that 2 women were appointed by this General Assembly to the highest court in the state, it is a great day for women in the Commonwealth. I will also point out that more Republican women than ever ran for Congress in 2010. More Republican women than ever were elected. 4 Republican women were elected to governorships across the country. But to your question, I would say the reason, if I have to give a reason for why more women have not run throughout the years, it would be choices and priorities. That really our families have traditionally been our #1 priority, and our natural inclination to want to be there for them, to be there with them. I know it kept me out for a long time. But interestingly enough, that inclination that we have as women has suddenly propelled women in numbers that conservatives have not seen before into the arena to run for office, to stand up for what they believe their #1 priority is, and that is their families. They see their families in jeopardy because of the direction that they see the government going in, and they feel compelled to be involved. So I think on the Republican side, we are going to see unprecedented involvement from women, and we're going to see the establishment forced to accept them.
So Kate reminds us that in some ways the glass is half full. Okay, Terry.
So I think part of the answer to this is it's a little bit generational. You know, I think there was probably a time when women weren't as well accepted, but to be honest, in the last 10 years, every time I've been involved in, you know, trying to recruit candidates and talking with other, you know, political figures where we're trying to brainstorm on recruiting candidates, the first thing everyone says is we need a woman to run because women make the best candidates. So I like having music to my, you know, it's like when you pray, you know, the benediction and you start hearing the, okay. But I think the biggest obstacle is managing the expectation of the potential candidate. A lot of people assume that if you're going to run the party, the political party, or some establishment group is going to do all these things to pave the way. It doesn't work like that for anybody. You have to prove yourself first. And so that's one thing, is managing that expectation that, okay, yes, I'll finally decide, yes, I'll run, and now you all will bring the money, the volunteers, the resources, and all that. It doesn't work like that. You got to prove yourself first. And the other obstacle really is making that decision that you will open up your entire life to the public. And that is hard. That is very hard. It's not just you, it's also your family members. In this day and age, nobody's off the table when it comes to being a public figure. My husband got emails, as well as I getting emails. The one thing the press was pretty good about was he was active duty, he was a Navy SEAL, and they kept that out of the papers, and that was very helpful for us. But other than that, just getting someone to agree to put themselves out there and know that they will be publicly criticized, that they will be publicly scrutinized, that their entire life will be looked at, that's a big decision. So I would say that's the biggest obstacle, but it's not just for women, it's for men also.
So the practical side of things and living in the fishbowl is a real obstacle. What we're talking about is just individual views of the greatest obstacle to more women becoming involved in politics.
Well, thank you. First, I must apologize for being late, but we just adjourned. Thank you for having the conference just, down the hall so that I didn't have to go very far. And I'll have to echo a little bit what Terry said, and that is the biggest obstacles I see are not limited to women. Nowadays, and particularly if you're running for the House of Delegates, it's the fact that you do have to disrupt your entire life. Oftentimes, it's part-time legislature where you're only going to get, $17,000 a year. So you have to balance your career and your family. And I sort of did it backwards. When I ran for office, and I think I might be the first person in the House who was a woman to do this, I was single when I ran, so I didn't need to worry about disrupting my family. I had to worry about, will I get a family? But that worked out okay, and then I became the first woman in the House of Delegates to have a child while serving in office, and we celebrate his first birthday party tomorrow. But I did have to really think about how is this going to impact my job, and just totally disrupting my life. And the more we talk to candidates about that, that's an aspect that they don't really focus on, is you will probably take a pay cut and you will struggle to find balance between politics, family, and career. And that's why a lot of people leave. even if they overcome the obstacle to get in to begin with, they find finally at the end of the day this balancing act can't be done, and they walk away.
So it's interesting that there seems to be a theme here of the personal, the cultural, really is something that women have to deal with a lot. Let's just talk a little bit more about the lay of the land, and then we'll go back to some of these issues that you've raised. I wanted to ask Dr. Elders, it's been more than a quarter century since Geraldine Ferraro was the national presidential ticket in 1984. Did you think that by this time we would have had a woman president or vice president, and why haven't we?
Well, I don't know why we haven't had one. I guess because we've not elected a president that had a woman running as vice president, as a vice presidential candidate. But, I'm really ready to get some women as presidents. And I really want us to really start thinking very seriously about that. And I think that we have, as I said, some in both parties. For a long while, women didn't get involved in many things because, first of all, they said we didn't have the background in the education, all right? Women went out and we got the background in education. 57% of the women, of the people in college now are women. And until 1920, we couldn't even vote. Well, now that we've got the education, well, then they said we didn't have the experience. Well, of course, we've had some women with an awful lot of experience. I think that probably none of us, we haven't had, nobody's had experience as being president. So, they have to learn that. And, I think last time, Hillary Clinton probably had more experience, than any woman that we've had. And so, I think she's loving being Secretary of State, and I think she's super at it. I think we couldn't have done better. But I'm just saying, so it's really more than the education. It's more than the experience. And, I think partly it's, again, I would go back to our idea of what a woman leader looks like and our not having the ultimate confidence. And so I think maybe we'll just have to keep working harder. If we don't, to try and get to vote, go out and vote for a woman, we may have to go to president. We don't have the right. If we can't get a vice president, and I want a woman female president because, frankly, I think that they could do a better job.
Thank you.
Of running the country, and I'm not just saying that. I think with the domestic issues, men are about power by nature. I mean, they're just, that's the way they are. And women are far more nurturing. They're far more reaching out. They're really less assertive. They're less about power grabbing. That's just not where they've been.
Okay.
And so,
thank you, Dr. Elders. Kate, do you think the 2008 campaigns run by Hillary Clinton and Sarah Palin have made it easier or harder for women to be elected to one of those top offices?
Well, first of all, when I think about someone like Nancy Pelosi, I don't think of her as nurturing or not interested in power. I think that is an individual thing, personally. I think that a lot of women are interested in power and a lot of men are more compassionate. So I'm a little iffy on that one. But I think Sarah Palin had a dramatic impact. I'll talk more about her because I thought more about her and what happened. I think it was, if anything, inspirational for Hillary Clinton to be out there and as an example of a woman running as for president, and I really thought she was going to win. I truly did. I'm not exactly sure how that whole thing happened, but Sarah Palin was a fascinating example for why I believe we have not had at least a Republican woman president, and that is the unprecedented attack and undermining and belittling and humiliating of this very fine, very accomplished, very, bear with me, bright woman who was attacked virtually the week after she had been nominated. They started going after her children, her family, her husband. She was accused of never having accomplished anything. She was governor of Alaska with they had a surplus at the time, okay? They weren't in a deficit situation, they had a surplus. And this woman was able to work with both sides in order to cut the budget. That is unprecedented in normal circumstances, but certainly when you have a surplus, that took incredible skill and talent. She's somebody who would be the poster child for the National Organization of Women, were she on the left. She was a self-made woman. She did not come from a background of wealth or elitism. She did not have a Princeton degree. She scratched and clawed and beat the establishment time after time. She ran against an incumbent Republican with the support of a lot of Democrats. She had an 80% approval rating in Alaska, and yet she was driven into this ridiculous state of where she was perceived to be incompetent and no experience, and just this attacked for the baby she bore, and would she qualified to be president with a special needs child. Do you remember that? I mean, that was a stunning thing, and that is something that conservative women have to face when they enter the arena, because quite frankly, the media, I think if we look at it objectively, tends to be, the mainstream media tends to come at this from a leftist perspective, a more liberal perspective. And they have gone after Michelle Bachmann. And I will tell you, the conservative media, men, have gone after Michelle Bachmann. Did you see Chris Wallace 2 weeks ago ask Michelle Bachmann on national TV, "Are you a flake?" How many men are asked that question as the opener on a Sunday morning television show? Why is she incompetent to serve as president because she takes migraine medicine? Now that's a case where women need to stand up and say, "How dare you?"
So the media is a big problem here.
I think the media had a lot to do with it, and the refusal of the establishment Republicans to stand up and defend this woman who was these women who were unjustly attacked.
Our two women who have served in the state legislature, I'd like to ask both of you why you think a woman has not been elected to statewide office in the years since Mary Sue Terry. The Democrats, Jennifer, have had a couple of female nominees on the ticket, but neither of them did very well at all in the general election. And Terry, there's not been a Republican statewide nominee in a while, although there have been two women elected to Congress. So what are the factors that have contributed to that, do you think?
You know, again, I don't know that it's a male or a female thing. I mean, the more the people run, the more opportunity there is to elect a woman. We just haven't had that many women putting themselves out for statewide office. It is a tougher race. You know, you can ask Lieutenant Governor Hager. I mean, running statewide is not an easy thing. You are all over the Commonwealth. You can't hold down a full-time position. If you're in a situation where you need to have income, it's very difficult to find somebody that's going to pay you a salary when you're not there to work. You know, I mean, come on. You know, not that many. You know, although I will say a couple of law firms do carry some of the gubernatorial nominees, but of course, they're lawyers. So it is a little tougher for, you know, I mean, that's just a hard race to begin with for anyone to get into. The more women that run, the more chance we're going to have at getting a woman actually elected. And I really think that's it. We just have to get the numbers up of women who are running. And again, it's generational. I think women 40 and below, you're going to start seeing more and more women in the races. But, you know, Jennifer made a great point about the family and, you know, trying to take care of those things in most cases first. In her case, after. For me, never. I went into the General Assembly thinking I would be like Jennifer, and eventually we'd have our family, and then Tom and I decided not to have kids. But it is, you know, women have a lot of things to take care of before they run. So I think that's probably the biggest obstacle.
I think I would echo a little bit of that. I think this is true of the 2008 race, the 2009 race, and even the 1993 race, is whether you are a woman or not, whether you're going to win is going to depend on the quality of the campaign you run and the quality of your staff.
That's right. And
I have seen lots of candidates, regardless of what they are, who ran terrible campaigns. Yeah. And that's why they lost. Not because of their gender or their race or what color hair they had or what kind of medicine they took. Because at the end of the day, what people pay attention to is what the media says, but what wins elections is the ground game.
That's right.
And I do think where women in the past have been handicapped is they have not, for whatever reason, taken the time to learn about the ground game and learn how to execute it or surround themselves with people who do. But where I have enormous hope is if you look at the political professionals who are running the ground game, more and more of them are women. And I think some of them may end up running for office or will get hooked up with women candidates, and we will break that glass ceiling.
Thank you. We are going to let you talk. So.
I have to agree with what Kate said about the media. I think what's happened has happened at the national level and at the statewide level more than it's happened at the local level. I think women candidates for school board, for county board of supervisors, for city council are covered fairly, as are men candidates for those offices. And it's crucial for women to run for higher office to serve in some of these offices before they go for the top job. There has to be a network of folks who are building up support and serving in local government and then state government. And, the state is where the ceiling has been hit. And the media has a lot to do with it, because I think the media at the statewide level and certainly at the national level, the line between entertainment and news has been crossed and obliterated. And politics today at that level is covered as entertainment more than it's covered as substance.
Thank you. According to Rutgers University, Virginia ranks 38th among the states in percentage of women in the state legislature. We have 19%. Colorado is first with 44%. That's a big difference. South Carolina is last with 9%. Are there particular things about Virginia that hold women back? Any of you?
Well, I'll tell you one of the reasons I stepped down, and I actually served until 2009, for the record. I had 9 years. Thank you. But I did step down after my 9th session because I was really having a tough time juggling both a full-time job. I mean, in our household, my income was necessary. I had to have a substantial income to support, the lifestyle that Tom and I, had chosen. Not that we're fancy people, but unfortunately, we invested in real estate, and we're paying those mortgages. Okay, we're paying those mortgages. They're not going to foreclosure. But we did, we needed both of our incomes. It was very important to us to both have a decent income, and I wanted to excel at work. I wanted to have a career that I felt really good about. As you rise in leadership in the House, that takes more and more time. It's really hard to find an employer that's going to support you and let you go away so frequently. And Jennifer, I think, runs into these same challenges. And so you get to a point where you can't progress any further at work, and you can't progress any further in the House because I was already the chair of a committee. I came to the point where I thought, it's time for me to get back out into just having one job and be able to focus on one job and feel successful about my occupation and my career path. And so that was the reason really that I left. And Tom had just retired from the military, and we wanted to have a little more time together. Then we decided we needed to have a little more time apart. No, I'm kidding. How many Navy, Army wives, Air Force, and Marine Corps and Coastie wives do we have here today? Yeah, you guys know what I mean, right? Yeah, you do need a few days that you have on your own to get projects done. But as far as Virginia, we're a part-time legislature, and so you've got to have an employer who's willing to let you go away for 45 or 60 days, and then you got the special sessions, and then you've got the interim committee meetings, study committee meetings, different things that pull you back to Richmond during the year. You really have to have an understanding organization that you're working for to let you do that, and that's tough. And so that's tough for everyone, but because there are fewer women in that pool, it has a larger impact on the women.
Any other thoughts about why it is that Virginia lags? Is it a cultural thing at all? Is it not enough being done to recruit women?
I don't think so. I can only speak for the Democratic side, but my guess is it's the same is true for the Republicans. There are, people go out of their way to recruit women. And when women do run, in very rare instances, does the fact of there being a woman become an issue. But Terry is exactly right. The number one reason why people say no, whether they're a man or a woman, is my job won't let me. I gotta eat. Or I can't take the time away from my family. And I think a lot of people really underestimate the sacrifice that it takes to not only run for office, but to serve. And I am lucky. I live 2 miles away from the Capitol. So I don't have to worry about being away. And people ask me all the time, again, how are you doing it with a baby and a full-time job and this and a husband and blah, blah, blah. I barely treaded water last session. And the only reason I could do it was because when we were here late at night, my husband could bring my son. I don't think I could have done it if I lived in Hampton Roads or, God bless Annie B. Crockett Stark, but I think that is the biggest thing holding people back is, and Terry and I are probably going to agree more than we disagree today, but it's being a part-time.
We always did.
We always did, that's true. Being a part-time legislature where you have to balance so many other things and eventually something's got to give. And for some women, they're not willing to make that sacrifice. For others, they can't make that sacrifice. And for some, once they do, they can't maintain it.
Does anyone else have practical advice? Because this seems to be a real obstacle for women. Thelma said a few minutes ago, you can do everything, you just can't do it all at the same time. Any other thoughts on that?
I just wanted to add a little bit to what you all were saying. When I became party chairman, honestly, of the Republican Party in Virginia in 2003, honestly, I didn't think anything of being the first woman chairman. I called myself chairman, I still do, but it just went completely over my head. It didn't make any difference. When I hit the road and I went to go to each Republican group and talk to all of the different organizations just to introduce myself as the party chair, I will tell you I had a shocking experience, and that was so many women came up to me, a lot of them older women, and grabbed my hand, some with tears in their eyes, some with tears streaming down their faces, and they said, I never thought I'd see the day that a Republican woman, that a woman was elected party chairman. It shocked me because I've never felt any barriers within the Republican Party, and I've worked hard throughout. I've labored in the vineyards for years, and my father was, as Peachy Ward will tell you back there, he was very involved, but I was always led to believe by the powers that be in the party, I could be anything. But there does seem to be this mentality through the years, that's a generational thing, that is taking a long time to overcome. And because of that, I started a group called the Jennifer Byler Institute. And it was a proactive step that I took in recognition of those tears and that sense of great accomplishment that we finally got a woman elected chairman of the party. And Samantha Vanderpool was in one of the first classes of JBI. And on the first day of the first class, I asked the ladies, and I asked them this subsequently, how many of you, these are women who applied for this, for these coveted seats on this training organization. They've been active, they've been involved in politics. How many of you would consider running for office one day? Out of the 25 of those women at the first class, one tentatively raised her hand. And I asked them, I went around and asked, why not? Why aren't you thinking about running? And most of the ladies said, I prefer a supportive role. I work very hard behind the scenes. I think Thelma might have even said that. She's used to supporting candidates and had never thought about running for office. Well, after 8 months of training, 8 months of teaching them how to speak in public, how to raise money, how to network, all the things, all the nuts and bolts and the practical things that go into running for office, I asked on the graduation day, how many of you would consider running for office? Every hand shot boldly and proudly into the air. Absolutely, they would consider that. So I think, at least in the Republican Party in Virginia, we have now had 5 years, 6 or 7 years actually, of this class. So we've got this farm team out there of people who've been trained and prepared, and they're starting to run, just like Samantha did. They're starting to run for office. And I think we're going to see, as a result, if these practical obstacles of how do you live, how do you make a living, if those can be overcome, the training and the support and the encouragement that sometimes women need a little extra of, I don't know why, but that's just the way some of us are, I think we're going to see more and more women running.
Bob, do you run into these sorts of issues at the Sorensen Institute?
Yes, and I think generational is correct. I think in an older generation it wasn't expected. You had to be asked, you had to be begged to run. Today, you have to be asked once, perhaps, if you're a woman. Men don't have to be asked. They just run. As the only testosterone-impaired member of this panel, I can say that. The homework I did for this panel was to call my hometown State Senator Mary Margaret Whipple and ask her what the chief impediment was. And she came up with something that I think is new in politics, or newer. You have to be pretty tough to be in politics these days, and you have to be prepared to be criticized in very public ways. And there are many people, both male and female, who are not willing to put up with that, and who can blame them? So I think there's an equality among younger women and younger men in terms of accepting that risk, accepting that challenge. And the older generation, it wasn't the same. Women had to be begged.
Dr. Elders, what advice would you give to women in terms of learning to face criticism?
Well, I'm obviously an expert at facing criticism. And as you say, you know, I don't think anybody ever sits and want to be criticized. You know, I don't think you ever learn. You know, but what you have to do is learn to accept it and listen and know. And I think I'll have to tell you what I did. I don't know. I decided that it was not about me. It's about the issues. And I'm bringing up an issue that, far as I was concerned, was very important and very critical to me, and very important, especially for young, poor, uneducated black women. I was really, into trying to make sure that all children were planned and wanted, and I still feel exactly the same way, because I felt it was really one of the greatest impediments that I saw for women in the South. In fact, we felt that in politics, the only way you could run in Arkansas in politics was you had to be a rich white man. And from what you're saying, I don't think that's changed a lot. I say that because, well, they're talking about they have to have their jobs. Well, many of them, we have wealth that they don't have to worry about, or in a company that they're going to get their same amount. In fact, they're proud to have them there because they've got somebody that can help them get through the kinds of rules and regulations that they need for their company. And I'm not knocking that. But I'm just saying that their benefit is not necessarily, having to give up the hours in the day. So, but as far as the criticism, I felt very strongly that what I was about and what I wanted to do, and the reason I went to Washington. Now, I didn't go to get a job. I had a job that was better than the one I got. But that's neither here nor there either. But I'm just saying that I really felt strongly that I need to do something about an issue that had been out there for a very long time, and that we had not talked about it. We're sexual beings from the day we're born until the day we die. And yet, nobody talks about it. And these, poor young women out there who got the brunt of this. I mean, they were ending up poor, ignorant, and they may not have been slaves, but they were enslaved for the rest of their lives. And I felt that I wanted to do something about it. And the only way that I felt we could do something about it is to educate them and make sure they had the resources that they needed to take care of themselves. So it was easy for me to take the criticism. I felt that the only reason it hadn't been talked about is they hadn't had the right person to talk about it, and that I was the right person, and I wasn't going to lose this opportunity.
So you steel yourself to criticism by having a purpose and a belief. Several people raise the media and scrutiny by the media as one of the greatest challenges facing women in politics today. Is there anything that you could suggest to deal with that greater scrutiny that perhaps women get, or different kind of scrutiny that could turn it from a disadvantage to an advantage?
Scrutiny is a really nice way to put it. I don't give it that. I really don't. Look, I think Barack Obama did not receive scrutiny, and yet there are stories. There was report after South Carolina is a great example. They are the last, I think you said, in representation in state legislatures. Well, let's look at what happened in South Carolina in 2010 when Nikki Haley was running, and she won, which is a miracle given what she had to go through by this supposed scrutiny. It wasn't scrutiny, it was bias. And two bloggers accused this woman of having an affair with them. Okay, it was a stunning accusation because these people appeared out of nowhere, no corroboration, no proof, nothing, and yet every major news outlet reported on it. Nikki Haley came out and said, I will step down if one bit of evidence is produced that can back up this accusation. Nothing was produced, and yet continually throughout the campaign until the day it ended and after, that little paragraph was added to stories about Nikki Haley by the mainstream media. That was not right. That's not scrutiny. That's an attempt to determine and impact the outcome of the election. So that is what, I don't know if it's because she was a woman, because she's an American, she has Indian heritage. I don't know what it was. But that is not scrutiny. And what I think needs to happen is the establishment, the men, need to stand up and say enough is enough. The Republican presidential contest is a great example. And right now, Mitt Romney and Pawlenty and the Gingrich and the lot of them could come out, and when Michelle Bachmann is attacked with these ridiculous things, like, are you on drugs, that you think that these things, and they're just ridiculous stuff that is being said by the media about her, they need to come out strongly and say enough is enough. I wish we had more men in this room, because I think I'm so glad that Governor Hager is here, because it is incumbent on the party leadership to start taking a role and to say, we want more women. Conservatives, we want more women, because you know what? But a lot of women have never considered the Republican Party, have never considered conservatism, because we don't have many women out there championing our ideals. We want well-spoken women, and our party needs to start standing up for these women, encouraging them, recruiting them, but backing them up when they are just attacked by the media. So,
any other thoughts on that, dealing with bias?
I think the number one piece of advice is, and it's very hard to follow, don't take it personally. Don't take it as gospel, and get validators. How many of you all live in Richmond and have heard of the Richmond Free Press? Okay. The Richmond Free Press editor hates my employer. Hates my employer. And takes an opportunity whenever he gets, or when it's a slow news week, to take pot shots at my employer, and then puts in there, for those that don't know, Delegate Jennifer McClellan is Assistant General Counsel at Verizon. And, you know, I used to get upset at it, and now it's just like, there's nothing I can do about it. I'm not going to quit my job, so whatever. I used to worry about how many people in my district, every time he says that, registers with them. But I had enough validators in the community, and I focus more on what I'm doing, not what the Richmond Free Press is saying about me, that most people just come up to me and they're like, oh, you know, that stuff in the Free Press, like, we don't care. Because they're out there saying, well, and, you know, when I have a problem and I call Delegate Jennifer McClellan, she takes my call, she does what she can. If she can't solve my problem, she at least makes me feel like she did the best that she could. And that means more, and is talked about more in the community than, oh, is Ray Boone upset at Verizon today? So, but again, the first couple of times that happened, I mean, my husband will tell you, my stomach just knotted up, and I was like, this is not fair. You know, I have nothing to do with, you know, whether or not Verizon advertises in his newspaper. What he's saying about me is not true, but you just have to reach a point where you're like, look, he buys ink by the barrel. He's going to say what he wants to say. I can't stop it. All I can do is focus on what I'm doing and what I'm doing to make people say things about me. And that's the best advice I think I can give.
Thank you. A number of organizations, both conservative and liberal, and Kate, you mentioned one, focus on attracting women candidates to office and offering them support. Are these groups effective, do you think, generally? If so, why aren't there stronger results? But in any case, is it an important thing for women who are thinking about office to get involved with one of these groups?
You know, I think the groups can give you some basic training about running a candidate campaign and, you know, doing fundraising and things like that. But they're, you know, all politics is local. And so until you get into your own community and learn your community and get to know the voters, the electorate, what you learn in one of those groups can be a good foundation, but it's not going to make or break whether you win an election. It's going to give you some tools. It's going to give you some courage. I think one of the best things those kinds of groups can do, and there's other ways to do it too, is get you around people who've already made it, have already become elected. I mean, that was what really did it for me, was when I began having, you know, social relationships and just, you know, personal relationships with, you know, folks like Bob McDonnell. Bob McDonnell was my political mentor, and he really helped me believe in myself. Once I was able to meet other people who had already gotten there, and not women so much, just other people, that made me realize, oh, well, shoot, if he can do it, I can do it. If she can do it, I can do it. And it's really 95% of succeeding at anything is belief. You know, 5% is technical tools and expertise that you can always learn or gain. But 95% of it's belief, and the belief comes from being around people who've done it. You know, I think for women, you know, again, it goes back to being generational. My mother's generation didn't run for politics, didn't run for office. There were issues then, and you weren't accepted as being a good candidate or, you know, being promoted, and maybe politics was different. Maybe the party leaders, you know, were the ones who, you know, kind of anointed people to run. My generation, that's not an issue. The issue is just the women are also in the workforce. You know, now we've also, you know, that's also new. My mother didn't work. I mean, that's also new. We have competing things now that all of a sudden we get to do all of this and be successful at all this stuff, and so it's competing. But really, it's being around other people who've done it and have been successful. Those kinds of forums bring those people in to talk to you. But, you know, just getting out there and getting around and meeting people, and not where they're the celebrity on the dais talking to you, but where you're just seeing them as an everyday person and realizing, oh, well, gee, you know, she cleans her toilets in her house too. You know, she cooks her husband dinner too, and she's still running for political office. She changes diapers, you know, she nurses her baby. I mean, you know, they're just like me. If she can do it, I can do it. That's really, I think, the most beneficial experience.
I think these groups and the Sorensen Institute offer tools, we offer courage, and we offer a network of support of people who have been through it and who are willing to go out and say, this young person who's just gone through this program deserves my support, deserves your support. Building a network is very important for people. And, you know, there are many ways to do that. I've taught a session with the Jennifer Byler Institute and with the Democratic Party as well. And, of course, Sorensen, we try to take equal numbers of Democrats and Republicans in each class. Jen McClellan is a wonderful graduate of one of our programs years ago. But I think what we face is an unlevel playing field at the level of Jen's level of service and above. There is basically a level playing field when you're running for local office, for men, for women, with the media and with the districts in which they're running. Once you start running at the statewide level, you're dealing in territory where incumbents have a tremendous advantage. And face it, in the General Assembly, 80% of the incumbents are men. 82% of the incumbents are men. And 66% of them in the House right now have no opponent, and 50% of them in the Senate right now have no opponent. So there is no level playing field at the level of the state legislature because redistricting is so efficiently accomplished that the districts that are competitive are few in November and perhaps many more in June or this year, August.
Bob, do you see any trend of baby boomers moving into retirement and then thinking about politics as a career?
Yes, we have seen that in Sorensen classes. We have a wonderful collection of 35 individuals in our current 10-month class, 15 Democrats, 15 Republicans, and 5 independents. And the baby boomers are well represented, and they're giving back to their community. Most of them are not going to run for any office. Most of them are just going to stay involved in politics at their local level, and yet they're wonderful, engaged people who want to give back. And I think the generation that's following them wants to give back. We're seeing more and more women try to get into our program, and the level of women getting into the program is increasingly good. So I think you know, the generational battle has been won, but it isn't over because there's still some generations around that haven't learned it yet.
We'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the Tea Party before we leave here. Some commentators have noted that the Tea Party has strong female representation. Of course, here in Virginia, we have Jamie Radke running for a Senate nomination. Has the Tea Party movement done more than traditional channels to allow women to get involved in politics?
I guess I don't know why the Tea Party would be any different than any other. I mean, there have been organizations that pop out, you know, during every 10-year period, whether it's on the liberal or the centrist or over on the conservative side. I don't know why the Tea Party would be one in particular to focus on. I mean, to me, it's not a lot different than when Ross Perot had his organization. And, you know, I mean, I'm more familiar with the Republican conservative side. I know there have also been organizations, you know, the unions, quite frankly, on more the Democratic side. So I wouldn't focus, I guess this is one of those I don't really agree with the premise of your question answers.
I actually disagree. I think that the Tea Party has been a tremendous platform for women, and I think it's a fascinating array of women, a lot of retirees, a lot of moms, a lot of professional women, and the focus has been on economic issues, almost exclusively. Again, it's the media that likes to talk about the social issues as it relates to the Tea Party. You look at the Tea Party candidates who ran, for instance, the women who ran for Congress, and all the Republican women who ran for Congress affiliated, I think it was almost all of them, affiliated themselves with the Tea Party. It sort of gave them that platform, and the Tea Party was this just the most amazing, spontaneous grassroots uprising that sort of propelled people, at least into the nomination process, gave them a forum, gave them that, that group of individuals that Thelma was talking about that would come along and support them that weren't necessarily all Republicans, and it gave them sort of an entree. But those women who ran focused on economic issues. They focused on jobs. They focused on government spending, the economy, what needs to be done. And I think because of that, it sort of helped these Republican women break out of that mold of being, oh, social conservatives that we need to be scared of. Yeah, they are pretty much, almost all of them are social conservatives, but they didn't talk about those issues. That's not how they got elected. That didn't produce that groundswell of Republican and independent support that really allowed a record number of Republican women to be elected to Congress this year.